I'm living my best life on my terms, the way that I want to.
You're sitting around like $13 million portfolio. Very impressive numbers.
If I was to go to a time in my life where money became a thing, it was really when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. Always saw that conversations around money, stress, mortgage, bills, that was always the thing.
Ravi Sharma, property investor, founder of Search Property Buyers Agency and YouTuber, shares with us the story of how he got to where he is now from some very humble beginnings.
And at the time, there was 4 families living in that house. We've got 2 queen-size beds put together and the 4 of us like sleep on it. Migrant mentality, they were very big on you got to get your education in.
What was the direct influence that got you into one of your first investment properties?
Everyone I see happens to hate their job, so this seems like a no-brainer.
Opening up with us more about what he had to go through, what kind of a mindset he had to create to reach the level of success he has today.
And that was the light bulb. Everything changed after that. The goal is hold as many assets for as long as possible, and I can only do that if
Listening to it, there is no part of what you've just said I disagree with.
I went down that path of not following everyone else. This podcast making me realize a lot about myself, huh? I thought I only had the one option, and this was like probably the biggest lesson I've ever had.
If you like a story of how hard work and sacrifice can lead to massive success in property with a bit of banter thrown in between, you're going to enjoy this episode. My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and you're listening to my chat with Ravi Sharma.
Ravi Sharma, how you going, mate?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Mate, thank you for coming. I think this is going to be a really interesting chat. Personally watched a lot of your content. You've achieved some pretty amazing things in the property space, both personal portfolio, also through the buyers agency that you run as well. And obviously YouTube channel, I'm sure lots of people watching now will be quite familiar with. But we're going to unpack a little bit more about who Ravi is, what's got him to where he is today, because right now you're sitting around like $13 million portfolio. Very impressive numbers. You got some good runs on the board, man.
I appreciate it.
But I wanted to kick things off with, I guess, asking a little bit more of, can you tell me the story of when you realized money was actually important when you were a child? What kind of sparked things for you?
If I was to go to a time in my life where money became a thing, it was really when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. Always saw that, conversations around money, stress, mortgage, bills, that was always the thing, right? I never understood why. Clearly we were too young and we probably weren't interested. And then what happened was, as the years went by, what we realized, my brother and I, who's 2 years older than me, he pretty much brought up this, idea that, okay, like there's things like a mortgage, there's things that people have to pay for, and that's why mum may have to go back to work. She used to work before my brother and I got together or, came into this world. And then she then had to go back to work. But that was only after we got to like 10, 11, 12 years old. And the reason why, and at that point I was a mummy's boy, right? So I was like, hey, I'm not so okay with this. Yeah. And so he tried to explain why she had to go back to work. And it was essentially because money became an issue at home because, they were stressed out, there was bills, there's mortgages and things like that.
Issue how? Like as in like dad lost his job issue or?
No. So for context, right, my parents moved to the country, I'm going to say about 50 years ago now, 45, 50 years ago. And they all lived in basically the one place. So when mum got married, she got married at like 16 or 17. Dad was like 22 and they all moved into the family house. So we used to live in Campsie.
Mum got married at 16, 17?
Yeah, I know, it's pretty crazy.
Is that pretty standard though?
Not here.
No, but I mean like culturally, is that?
Not really. Like, I mean, I know that generation, they used to get married early, but not that early. And then at the time, Dad was only 22 and he also got married, obviously. And that's not common, but it's also not a surprise, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not the norm, but it's not like, wow, that's out of the blue.
Yeah, correct. Okay. And so they get married, they move into the family house, and at the time there was 4 families living in that house, right? So it's a 3-bedroom place. There's 4 families.
So you got bunk beds everywhere? Or?
Yeah. Like we've got 2 queen-size beds. They put together, and the 4 of us like sleep on it.
It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory stuff.
Mate, it was manic. And there was only 1 bathroom too.
Yeah,
so imagine like that many people.
How long do you guys live like that for?
We lived in Campsie like that probably for the first 10 years.
And so for you as a kid, like were you comparing to like the other kids at school going like, nah, this isn't right? Or were you like, no, this is just normal and you don't know any different? Or?
Yeah, like that was all we knew. Because when we were born, that's pretty much what the standard was. We didn't really talk about that at school or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it was really fun because you have a couple of other cousins and we're all hanging out. It's just a stay over all the time.
Yeah.
But what it was like each family has the one bedroom, right?
Okay.
And so it was like, okay, cool. I want to go hang out with my cousin. But if their door was closed, it was like, okay, I can't. And then I'd have to go back to my room. That was pretty much the situation.
Everyone's in the same, like they've got their own room.
Mm-hmm.
For you then, you saw the positive side of this straight away and you're like, this is cool. Like if I want to go hang out with my cousins, everyone's kind of close by. It doesn't sound like there's a negative connotation to this growing up of like this was so difficult.
Like when you're like 4, 5, 6 years old, you're living in fantasy world anyway. So it was pretty cool. It was fun.
What was it like though for mum and dad? Because I'm imagining to move to that kind of a living standard, were things pretty bad or is it just more the opportunity that Australia presented? Like why do that?
Yeah, so obviously migrant mentality, save all the money you can and then try and invest wherever you can. But because dad was also the youngest sibling of 4, mum decided she was going to be the one that was going to take care of us as kids because that's what she wanted to do.
Okay.
And so as a result, all the other families, there was a couple of them, they all decided, well, if you're going to stay at home anyway and take care of your kids, you may as well take care of our kids. And so they all had dual incomes coming through, whereas
you guys had one.
Correct.
Right.
And that's where, at the time, we didn't really think it was an issue because we're like, hey, mum's at home. This is fantastic. But in the background, there was stuff cooking, which is they could get further ahead. They were buying property, but dad, unfortunately, was at home. Mum was at home. Dad was working the one job and realized the only way he was going to get ahead was if he was going to substitute mum's income by taking up a second job or a third job as well.
So dad's doing what, like 60-hour weeks plus that kind of thing?
Yeah, correct. Like we would hardly see him. He was pretty much doing his normal job, which was in like logistics or something. And then he was also doing the night fill at Woolies.
Wow. And so is this rubbing off as a work ethic to you when you're a kid as well? Because it's just like, it's the norm that you see with dad?
Well, I think it was pro and con. So pro was, okay, he's really hardworking.
Yeah.
But the con to it was we would never see him. So when he was at home, if he fell sick for whatever reason, it was really awkward because we didn't have that relationship with him. So it was like, oh, okay, like, why is dad home? That's a bit weird. Okay, can't be ourselves. Like, it wasn't like an enjoyable thing all of a sudden because we never had that connection. So it was freaking weird.
Yeah, right. And I'm assuming that came through later in life as you started maturing as your own man?
Yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
we understood why things were happening the way they happened. And even to this day, like, I don't look back at that moment and go, oh, shit, like, what a shit father, like, he wasn't around. It's more like, wow, they had to go through that. Now let's create a world where I can have the choice to sit at home with my kids as well as my partner, and we can give them what I didn't really have, but I understand why they did it.
And so then circling back to you being about, what do you say, it was like 11, 12 and your brother kind of saying, well, no, like mum needs to go and do this now. Like all of the pieces start to slot into order and you're starting to understand why it's important that mum's now going back to work?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Right. Okay. And when was it that you started having the light bulb for yourself more around the investing side of things?
That didn't come till much later. So I think I'd mentioned to you as well that, when you're in year 6, so 12 years old, I think at that point I had put in my yearbook that I want to become a real estate agent.
That's right, yeah.
And the reason why was because we would, on the way to school, I used to go to Campsie Public School, and on the way there, you would pass like 4 real estate agencies.
Okay.
And what they would have is out the front, they had those catalogs, right? So you could see all the listings and things like that. And so I used to cut out the really cool houses.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like all these cool houses and make a little scrapbook. And I was like, oh, what do? They're a real estate agent. Oh, that's what I want to do. And it was all because I wanted to have these really nice houses, and I knew that he made a lot of money because sometimes I'd catch their car.
You see like a BMW driving past, yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's like rich. And that was at year 6.
Okay, so year 6, you're starting to go, I like real estate. Not for the reasons maybe you like it now.
Correct.
But that little like spark was lit.
Yeah, 100%. It was for the wrong reasons. I realized that years later. And so when I got to high school, real estate agent went out the door.
Yeah.
I was still interested in that sort of stuff, but now you're interested in girls and like doing other things, and you're like, yeah, whatever. And then I started getting to the point where I saw dad starting to make wealth because he would like have the accountant over or the mortgage broker over. I'm like, oh, what's he doing? And Deeps, my brother, would tell me, oh, like, you know, it's because he's invested regionally, he's got property there. That's why he needs to have these chats. And I'm like, why would he buy regionally? Why wouldn't he buy here? And a lot of those learnings started coming from there.
So actively from dad sitting you down, or more passively from you like watching like what's going on here?
Yeah, it was all passive, because I think for him, he was also, they were very big on, you got to get your education in. So we had that crossroads where they said, look, you can either work, right, if you're not going to be doing well at school. But if you do well at school, you don't have to work.
Okay.
So during high school, most of our friends would have to go work at KFC or Macca's.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to do that.
I was a KFC kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm definitely a KFC kid now. More consumption than working. But I didn't want to do that. So we were incentivized to basically kill it at school. Otherwise, you're going to have to find a job at a fast food restaurant.
And I'm assuming you did. Were you like a straight A student?
Yeah, I was like school captain, school darks. Like I nailed it, right? But that was part of the learning where I thought that was everything. But what I realized afterwards was school was made up of random stuff that doesn't really matter.
You're a pretty creative dude. Was that hard for you killing it at school? Because normally when I meet other creatives, I'm very much creative mindset. I was not killing it at school. I ended up winning a whole bunch of awards in year 12, but they were all around like arts, media, that kind of stuff. Like I went to Government House for a perfect score, but it was for like media production.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like loved it. English, math, everything else, I was constantly in, it was detention. They called it the withdrawal room. But now I learned it's because like I'm dyslexic, ADHD, like all of the things were just firing. Being a good student was quite tricky. I always thought most high-level creatives kind of have that same difficulty concentrating, following the rules, like, but you're there getting the ducks, you're getting A's. Like, were you the naughty kid at all and you just were better at hiding it? Or like...
Well, look, I still did drama. So that was like my outlet.
Yeah.
And then I would go in and say, I know why I need to do these things because I want an easier life later.
Okay.
So I think that was really cool for me. I knew where I was going to head. My brother was 2 years older, right? So I could see his mates, the ones that didn't do so well, where they started heading, and the ones that were doing well, where they were heading. So for me, I was like, it's all a game. All I know is that I need to kill it at this, this, and this, and I have the ability to do it. So I have that, like, I have a really strong self-belief. And if it means that I have to do something that I'm not like the best at, I'll work my way through it.
Where'd that come from? The strength in your self-belief?
Yeah, we're getting real deep, huh?
Well, I personally think, and this is I've mentioned this on the show before, Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habits, one of my favorite books. They did this study apparently on Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program. And apparently, when they actually analyzed the 12 steps within it, they were useless. They didn't work. However, the data showed that people successfully did this program and they were really good. Apparently what the study actually showed was that when it was done through like a church group, and it was irrelevant on which religion it was, but the thing that was relevant was that there was religion attached. And they dug deeper and it found out that the thing that actually was important was belief. If people did those 12 steps and just didn't have like that power of belief, useless, didn't work. But as soon as they attached it to people that could believe, and I think the belief is such a key thing. Otherwise, all of this just falls apart if you don't actually believe you can do it.
Yep.
I'm always curious to find where it comes from with people, because I think that it's something that doesn't just have to be like, oh, well, you've got it, I can't have it. I think it can be created. But I'm curious to find if there's anything that comes to mind. And it's fine if there isn't, but if there's something that maybe comes to mind for you.
Well, if I'm really thinking about it, the only thing that I know with dad and mum, they were really strong-willed when it came to religion. So they weren't like, you know, they didn't enforce that stuff on us. But when it came to, hey, they needed to do fasting because there was a certain prayer they were doing or some shit like that, they were very much like, I will drop everything and be dedicated to it. And so when I saw that and then I would see them on the weekend and it was different, I was like, oh, they have enough will to be able to go and shift when they want to. That means as a human, we should have that. And I'm like, they're my parents, so I should have that too. And so I'm not religious. So for me, I was just like, well, I just need to be disciplined. And if I'm disciplined and I trust myself, I should be able to nail it. And so what happened was every year that I went through school, I'd be like, well, let's test it. And it would work. So I'm like, well, it must mean that I'm either special or I'm really disciplined. And so I think that's where the belief came from, is year after year of just following through with what I wanted to follow through with, having a really strong vision for what I wanted to do. It worked. So even during like high school, yes, I did quite well at school and, you do your HSC and whatnot. But while I was doing the HSC, I think a lot of English advanced that I was doing, where I got like a band 6 and I did really well, a lot of it was just rote learning because that was the game. So it wasn't necessarily that I was the smartest dude. It was just that there's a bunch of rules. You follow the rules, you stick to the rules, and you'll nail it. And that was why I don't have much respect for the schooling system, because I'm like, I'm not a smart dude. My grammar's terrible, but I still got a band 6 in a subject that is supposed to be really difficult, and you're supposed to be talented at English. So that's probably where it came from. I don't know.
So it sounds like you've created it through giving yourself evidence that you can do certain things. And then when you look back and you kind of just grow that evidence of like, if I can stay disciplined, do these things, then you look back and you're like, oh, I did that. Well, I guess I can do these other things. It kind of snowballs.
For sure. So in year 10, a classic example was in year 10, you get to do your school certificate. And then I knew that I was going to go to year 12. So I was going to do the high school certificate anyway. So the school certificate means nothing. But to everyone else, this is like the big test. Like it does mean something. Fortunately, I had my brother who's gone through it, and he's like, it doesn't matter what you do in the school certificate because you're going to go to year 12 anyway. Okay. So what I did was I was like, okay, well, what I can do is I can test the theory that I'm actually nailing this game. And instead of studying for the 5 subjects, I'll only do one subject. I'll only study for the one subject, and I'll do it my way.
Yep.
Big risk, right? Well, not really, because I was still going to go do HSC anyway. And I can't believe now thinking about it, because if my kid was to say this to me, I'd be like, mate, what's wrong with you? And so I remember it was history that I was focused on. Okay. The others I didn't care. Now, I didn't go, I'm going to spend all the time I would on 5 or 6 subjects into the one. I just said, look, I can still enjoy my life, sit on MSN Messenger and do all those things.
Yep.
And I'll only study for the 2 hours, and I'll do it for one subject because I need to prove to myself that this works.
Like hyper-focus.
Yeah, hyper-focus. But I don't need to do it for 5 subjects because it doesn't matter. It's a waste of time. And so I remember in history, I ended up scoring a 96. And the others were like 60, 70, and I didn't feel bad about it. I was like, oh, this is great because the theory works.
So it's really about proof. That's what it all comes back to for you. Like you trial and error, you're like, does this work? As soon as you see a green light of something works.
You double down.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the belief is not questioned again.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, because there's evidence.
Correct.
I like it, Ravi.
You're getting this podcast making me realize a lot about myself, huh?
Well, if we could start going into the property side of things. So dad was buying property. He was an influence, but not a direct influence. It wasn't like he was sitting you down every day going, you got to do this, got to do that. But you're kind of watching going, all right, this is working over here. What was more like the direct influence that actually got you into like one of your first investment properties? Your book, a seminar, or what?
Yeah, so because we had that deal that I do well at school, don't have to work, the day after my formal, I had an interview at Hugo Boss, and that was the first job I got. Right?
Hugo Boss,
yeah,
okay.
It was good.
Yeah.
I was like, I avoided the whole, fast food part, and I went straight into retail,
which
was fantastic.
Photos of you working at Hugo Boss that we can get our hands on?
No, we don't. No? But what I realized was, hey, there was 2 things. It was if I work in high-end not real estate, high-end retail,
yep,
I would then be able to meet a lot of chicks.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'd get paid better than if I worked at a fast food restaurant.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, as soon as I get one of these big names on my CV, I'm sorted. And it just so happened that they needed Christmas casuals or whatever around that time. So I went, yes, great, took the job, fantastic. Must have nailed the interview to get it. And then after that, I stayed in the retail space. So the, clothing retail, worked at Saba as well for a couple of years. And it was fantastic because it would be usually me as the only guy and there was like a bunch of chicks. So everything was great.
Did it work? You met a lot of girls?
Yeah, I met a lot of girls.
Yeah, okay.
So it was great. I was making money and I was meeting people.
Okay.
So that was the idea. But while I was working there, I think it was around, I was like probably 18, 19 around that time. And my brother was like, hey, maybe we should go to this seminar about real estate. And I was like, okay, but why? And he goes, oh, well, because, we've seen dad do this. We should learn about it. And they've got this mad tagline at the time, which was buy 10 properties in 10 years and you can retire.
Sounds enticing.
I'm like, everyone I see happens to hate their job. So this seems like a no-brainer because we're like going to be 20. So by the time I'm 30, I'm done. And he's like, yeah, okay, cool. So me and Deeps and I, we went and we attended this seminar. And all I remember was that there was, I don't know who hosted it, but it was 10 properties. You buy them for like 250 to 300K. They'll double. By the time you're 30, you sell half the portfolio, keep the other half. And that was easy. And I was like, okay, sounds reasonable.
Yep.
And that's probably what sparked it. But what I didn't like was everyone that was teaching it was like older, right? They weren't our age. They didn't look like us. They were all in suits, and it was very corporate-y.
It's hard to relate.
Yeah, hard to relate.
Yep.
And so when I now think about like the YouTube channel and whatnot, it's like I've always tried to be relatable, just be myself. And that's probably why the channel's grown and whatnot. But going back to then, even when you look at the audience, everyone was older. So I'm like, I don't know if this is meant for us. Like, I know that they've gone 20 to 30. That's because we said it to ourselves. But really, these guys are in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. So maybe that's why it works for them. I don't know. And so that's pretty much what sparked this interest in going, okay, I remember I was interested in real estate. Now we're talking about real estate and we can see that Dad's done something there. Let's start asking him what he's done.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you then started asking Dad, and your first purchase was regional?
Yep, regional.
Yep. All right. Well, can you, because instead of, I don't want to unpack like the entire portfolio, but what I did want to unpack with you is more so the lessons that you've learned, probably more specifically from the first three that you carried throughout the rest of the portfolio that really helped with the growth side of things.
Yeah, good question. So I think the biggest learning was not following the herd. So at the time, a lot of my friends, they pretty much had parents as well telling them that maybe you should buy an investment property. And at the time, you could get a unit in Sydney for about 400 to 450.
Okay. And when's this, like sort of 2010-ish?
Yeah, so 2010 I graduated. So we're probably talking around, 2010, 2011.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And so they went down the path of, okay, we're going to listen to our parents. Some listened and they went and bought a unit. Some didn't do anything because they wanted to party up. And then myself, I was like, well, what's Dad done? Because I don't know about any of these guys and they have no runs on the board. So I need to go to someone who's actually done this before. And so Dad by no means is like this property mogul or anything like that. He just happened to buy a couple of properties, right? And when I spoke to him, he was like, well, you could buy something for 400 locally and it probably grows, but you can go out 3 hours from Sydney and buy a place for like 250K and it's a house. And I was like, that's a no-brainer because everyone's going to want houses at some point. And so that's the direction I took. And when we started putting numbers and yields together, he was like, the property that you purchased for 250K could probably rent for like 290 or 300. So with interest rates where they're at the time, you're probably only slightly negative. And I was like, this is a good deal because I'm getting a house that's cheaper, plus it's going to take care of itself versus everyone else going out there and buying a unit. And the idea of like the first home owner's grant never crossed my mind because I had no intentions to move out. I'm like 19, 20 years old. So if I'm going to go get the first home owner's grant, I'm probably going to have to live in there. And I had no plans to do that. And so especially within the Indian families, you're like, no, stay in house as long as possible.
It's so good for your serviceability as well.
Yeah. And I only realized that years after. I'm like, oh shit, I should stay at home for a lot longer. But yeah, I went down that path of not following everyone else. So that was probably the biggest lesson. And that ties into the next part, which is how important cash flow is. Because everyone's focused, especially at that time, it was all the messaging at the time was, you got to buy for capital growth. Everything in Sydney, blue chip was the big thing.
Yep.
Buy blue chip areas, it will grow. That's how you retire wealthy. And for me, I was like, okay, that's great. But if I do that in my 20s, I probably hold 2 properties. And if the interest rates go up slightly, I'm cooked. Like I'm not going to have a life. And in my 20s, I want to go out. I want to go do things. I want to go travel. But I can't do that if like 600, 700 bucks is coming out of my pocket every week.
So you're even from the get-go kind of looking at it going, this has got to be either neutral or positive or maybe slightly negative. Like that was a forefront, or was that something maybe in rental number 2 or 3 that came as an important lesson?
I would say that was like important as soon as I had seen the first one where it was negative slightly.
Yep.
I was like, I don't think I'm going to have too many to go.
So you start multiplying the numbers and you're
Correct.
like, wait a sec, this doesn't go far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, and again, living at home, I didn't have to pay for anything. So I was fortunate on that front that I didn't have to pay rent. But I'm like, even still, like I'm not making a huge amount of money. I'm going to end up being in a position where I'm at my whole 3 and then I'm done.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, the goal is hold as many assets for as long as possible. And I can only do that if there's strong cash flow.
Hold as many assets for as long as possible. Is that a lesson from Dad, or is that something that you picked up along the way? Because I personally think that's one of the best lessons. And I think it seems to be misunderstood, or not misunderstood, but I think sometimes the strategy and the importance of the strategy can actually outshine the importance of just hold as many assets as you can for as long as you can. Like that's really what needs to happen.
Yep. Yeah.
And did that come more from dad, or was that more once you went to this 10 in 10 years?
No, I think it was because that whole method was hold for 10 years and then sell half of it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So dad's thing was just hold as many as you can for as long as possible.
Yep.
And he always used to tell me one thing. He's like, always remember that when you buy property, and this was like probably the biggest lesson I've ever had, and I now say the same thing on calls when people are scared. I say, what's the worst thing that's going to happen here? And I was like, okay, well, walk me through it because it sounds pretty bad, like from where I'm sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, the worst thing is if you buy well and the cash flow is not that bad, you'll be able to hold it for at least a couple of years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, and then it's going to be worth what you pay, like worth more than what you paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the worst that's going to happen is you get to hold it for 2 to 3 years. And if you struggle, just sell it. And I was like, is it that easy? And he's like, well, yeah, think about it. And that was the light bulb. Like everything changed after that. I'm like, I can keep acquiring property as long as my cash flow is not terrible. I'm an educated dude. I can figure out the self-belief kicked in. I was like, I'll figure out the work thing. I'll find a job if I lose my job, but I'm going to be a gun at the job. So I'm not going to get kicked out. So if I can just continue holding property, I'm sweet. And the worst thing that's going to happen is I can just sell it. So what do you have to worry about?
I don't know if you're into extreme sports at all.
No. Oh, well, I can watch like UFC if that's what you're talking about.
Not quite. No,
Okay.
I used to skydive, and I remember the first time I went bungee jumping, I grilled the guy. It's probably only about 15 minutes, but it felt like a long time, on everything about like the cord, how it works, all this stuff. And I learned everything I could about it. And now I reckon I could probably keep my pulse at like under 100 and jump off because
wow.
I just feel so comfortable. Don't get me wrong. It's still exciting. It's fun. It's everything. But it's like I felt like I learned so much about how safe it is that I was like, this is fine. And like I feel like you've just done the same kind of thing with property, where obviously it's a bit different jumping off of a structure and bouncing around like but financially it can feel like you're jumping off of a building and if you don't understand, no, wait a second, like this cord's got you. Like this is actually here to protect you, and this is exactly how it works. If things go wrong, this happens. If this goes wrong, this happens. All of a sudden that scary thing becomes fine.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because it's almost like you've calculated the situation. And now once you're comfortable with the risk element or what the worst case scenario is, it's business as usual.
Yeah. So number 1, not following the herd. Number 2, cash flow is king. Number 3, what are we looking at?
So number 3 was using a real broker.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. So when I came across the first broker that my dad was using, he was over and I was like, okay, he clearly is the broker. I'm going to use him to get my mortgage because that's the only way I can get one. I didn't know you could go to a bank. I didn't know what a real broker was. It was just this guy, really nice dude, helped me a lot in my early days. And what I realized after the fact was that he was just a mobile banker at CBA, right?
Did he call himself a broker?
No, I don't think he ever said he was a broker.
But it was just kind of presumed.
Yeah, I was like, oh, a broker is someone who gets you the mortgage.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
And so he was like, I can get you the mortgage. And he would always go back to CBA. And I didn't know any better because I'm like, oh, maybe CBA is the only one. And all my accounts were with CBA. So I actually didn't mind.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
what I didn't realize, now this is one of those big lessons, is because I thought I only had the one option, which was CBA. And so if CBA said no, that meant I couldn't get a loan.
Yeah, okay.
So he was my source of truth.
Yep.
And if CBA's policies didn't allow me to get a property, he would come back to me and say, you can't borrow. And I was like, okay, well, the broker said I can't borrow.
And when did you learn this? Like number 2, number 3, like how far in?
I think it was like maybe 4 or 5.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
It was years later. And it wasn't because, like I was interested in this stuff, but I didn't know everything about everything. You know, I was doing, I was working, I was doing life in your 20s.
Yep.
Right. And I just knew that this was the guy that was going to get me my loans. That's all I need to know.
And so when the light bulb went off, was it a bit of a moment of like, oh my God, I can really grow now? Like, did you start looking at other options, or was there kind of other circumstances that didn't really allow that?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. Like one, I definitely had no hatred towards him because there was no other options. It was more so because he helped me even get into my first couple of properties. I was always grateful. Strategy-wise, he helped me a lot in understanding all of those things. But then outside of property, I was obviously going through a different situation when it came to work-wise. Was I happy? Was I not happy? Did I want to pivot? Did I not want to pivot? So that's probably the other part that, you know, held me back from going and having, you know, a lot more properties in my portfolio. Was one, not going to different institutions because I didn't know they existed. And number 2 was I'm someone who in my 20s just tried a lot of things. And I was of the belief that I know that my friends are going to go down the path of I pick one career and I just continue working that one career. That one job becomes the next job and I can make my way up. So by the time I'm 30, I'm probably going to make, good money. In my case, all I was thinking about was in my 20s, similar to how I tried different things, I was like, I need to try different things because one thing's going to stick. And when I stick to that one thing and I like it, I'll double down because I've got the strong belief in myself that I'm absolutely going to nail it. So I may as well nail it with something I love because I'll probably nail it with something else anyway. So I may as well just figure out what I like. And then when I like it, I'm probably going to blitz everyone anyway.
And you'll be loving life.
Exactly. Because for me, I feel like I would have retired at that point because I could do what I love and I'll be good at it.
What's that classic saying? If you enjoy your work, you never work a day in your life, something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So it's side quest. You did a lot of things in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
What's one of the biggest things in your 20s from like a job that is very not real estate or investing related that gave you a lesson about real estate and investing that you still kind of hold true now?
Yeah, that's good. So for people that don't know, I was at Mars Chocolate. So as a graduate, got the job and I was like, yeah, okay. The strong belief is still there that I can get the job that's unattainable. And then I was working there. They tell me, you're a grad, you're going to work your way up to upper management. It's going to be fantastic.
How old are you roughly?
So this would be in 2013. So I was about 21, 22.
Okay. Yep.
And I've gone, okay, cool. I've got the job. I can now buy property. And that's when I started buying the properties. And then as years go by, I've decided I want to run my own business. I don't want to be answerable to anyone. And so this broker / not broker came over and he was like, oh, you clearly like property because you're buying property and you're really young. Have you considered like running your own thing as a conveyancer? And I'm like, what's a conveyancer? And he goes, the dude that helped you with all the legal stuff. And now in my head, I'm like, the broker gets me the loans. The conveyancer does all the loan, like the contracts.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like, what does that look like? He goes, oh, they're in great demand. I just don't have a good one. Why don't you do it? And there's a course that you do it for 6 weeks and you become a conveyancer. And I was like, okay. He leaves that night. I go and enroll myself, not knowing that it's not 6 weeks. It's like a year and a half. So it's like 18 months.
Bit of a difference.
Yeah, it was a bit of a difference. But at that time, I was like, if I can do this for 18 months and then I have my own business, I started calculating how much I could make. And I was like, oh, well, then I work for myself. Maybe this is it. I wanted to be in real estate. I'm not directly as a real estate agent, but I can do this and I'll still be in the space. So that was the idea that, okay, I'm going to go and do that. But while I was doing that, obviously I started doing some nightclub stuff because I got so bored of the conveyancing. So at nightclubs, I used to promote, host events and things like that. And while I was doing that, so going back to your question, that's probably a big lesson I learned, which is connections with certain people. So if I was talking to the venue manager of a certain place, that became a conversation with the general manager of that venue. And suddenly I realized that person has now management over a couple of different venues. So that starts opening up a lot more doors. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from a job that wasn't in real estate that I still hold true in my business now that is in real estate is the relationships you build, you've got to go deeper rather than spread yourself and go, I'm going to spray and pray. Rather than that, you go deeper in your relationships. So as I went deeper into that relationship, it actually opened up more doors rather than just going, I'll go to every single venue and just become like, their go-to person.
Do you dislike networking events by any chance?
Yeah, I don't like them.
Same. I hate running around a room and having surface level, meaningless conversations with 80 people.
Yep.
I would rather sit in a room with 2-3 people and actually talk.
100%. I think I'm a proper introvert, right? So I enjoy my own company. There's like 5 people I talk to and that's all I'm interested in. And then when it comes to like networking, I don't want to sign up to anything. I don't want to go out of my comfort zone when it comes to those sort of things because it's not so much I don't test myself. It's just that I don't think they mean anything. Everyone's trying to sell me some shit. And I'm like, I'd rather have an honest conversation with someone. And if the person likes me, they'll follow up next time and I'll follow up with them. And that's organic. So I think we share that same thought in there.
Very much. So everything's sounding pretty good. You're building a portfolio. You're in your early 20s. You got some lessons from mum and dad. You got some pretty solid belief in yourself. You're meeting a whole bunch of chicks at Ralph Lauren or Hugo Boss, sorry. Talk to me about when things got difficult.
I think it was around the time that I decided to test too many things, right? So again, it depends how you want to look at it, right? But I wanted to test multiple things. And part of that was figuring out that I don't want to do conveyancing now. I want to do the nightclub stuff, and I want to double down on that because I can make a lot of money, but I'm meeting people and I enjoy this at this phase of my life. And while I'm doing all those things, the income is volatile. So it goes up and down. And because of that, because at this point now I'm running my own thing, right? I'm also holding a lot of debt. Now, I don't know from memory how much I was holding, but it was in the millions, right? And so in my mid-20s, holding millions of debt, and now my volatility, because volatility in terms of income is driven by the fact that I want to test everything because I've probably got another 5 years to do this. And then by the time I'm 30, I need to have figured out what I want and what I like.
So why do you have another 5 years to do this? What gave you that sort of time frame?
Because in my mind, I was like, in my 20s, I can test things. But by the time I get to my 30s, I need to know what I need to do.
Okay.
Yep. It was made up in my head.
But that's what it was at the time?
Correct.
Right.
And so as a result of that, that's when I was really scared because I was like, okay, I now am at a crossroads where my belief system says to me that I need to go test multiple things, but that could mean that my income goes up and down. But I also hold a lot of debt, which means now if I want to hold all the debt, I need to stick to something earlier than when I actually wanted to. And I don't necessarily think I found what I absolutely love.
How'd you solve it?
What ended up happening was because I was testing so many different things, a couple of those things started compounding. And what I realized was with the nightclub stuff, as I said, deeper in my relationships, met certain people, started doing events that were bigger. And then I compounded that with the DJing, the wedding stuff. And I ended up starting to make more within the period of 6 months than I thought I was ever going to make.
So you were getting a bit nervous thinking, I don't have that much time left. I'm spreading myself thinner across different things, but I want to try all these different things because I still don't know exactly what speaks to me and what I really want to double down on. But you've already committed yourself to millions in debt with property and you're starting to go, wait a second, like I've got all of this debt, but now I'm kind of spinning plates to try and find out which one I want to focus on spinning. And what you're starting is it almost like a self-doubt of, is this going to come tumbling down? So then you just started spinning even faster to keep the plate spinning analogy going?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, well done. No, I think, it was definitely like, I can get myself out of this. And I already know with the worst case scenario with the debt, I can just sell property, but I didn't want to do that. So I was stubborn on that front. I said, no, I think I could figure this out myself. And so one thing led to another and things ended up working out because I doubled down on things that worked. And I ended up making a lot more, which meant, hey, now I'm in a position, not only do I not need to sell, but I might be in a position where I can start buying very shortly.
The importance of increasing your income, I don't feel is spoken about as much because I think it feels like a bit of a slap in the face to some people. It's like the Gina Reinhart inherit more coal kind of strategy. But there really is a huge importance to it. Like if you can increase your income by 25 grand, that can just make it absolute night and day with your serviceability in some cases. What advice would you have for anyone out there that wants to do this? But like you're saying, you're in nightclubs, you work in retail, you're in a conveyancing business, like you're doing all these things. For someone that's like, oh, I can't work like that, I can't do that. What's your advice for them?
Look, I think people are looking for creative ways to increase their borrowing capacities. Yeah, there's a lot of conversations around how do I structure things? I can go and do this and I can go to second tier lenders and trusts and this and that. I think what people need to do is simplify it all. I think they need to go back to the basics, which is I need to make more and I need to reduce my expenses. That's going to start allowing me to borrow more money. That's a good place to start. Now, I'm not saying just by doing that, you're going to get to 5, 6, 7 properties, but I think keeping it so basic and core means that you're not looking for a shortcut. And it starts getting you to think about your work ethic and starting to think smarter, right? So right now people are just going, I just want to think smarter. I don't really want to do harder, right? So work hard, work smart. They just want to do the work smart. So I got to figure out a loophole and then that'll allow me to unlimited borrowing capacity and then I've nailed it. And I don't have to change anything. The reality is you still got to work and you still got to increase your income. And there's still a limit to even those, avenues that you want to go down. And so I would go back to the core part, which is, okay, if you're making this much now, how in the next 5 to 10 years can you make more? And if you're comfortable in your job, then you're realistically asking for an uncomfortable result being the 1% life, which is financial freedom, retire early. Only 1% of people or less than that will ever achieve that.
I think it's 0.08% of people own more than 4 properties or 5 properties.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous, right? And so my thinking is that if you aren't willing to go and change jobs because you're comfortable and you like the people you work with, then you probably don't deserve to get to the 1% life. And it's so harsh, but it's true.
It is like, and listening to it, there is no part of what you've just said I disagree with, but it's just not a common narrative. But I think it is the narrative that so many of us need to actually really absorb to bring it to that next level.
Yep. And I think on the other side of that is people get, triggered when it's like, oh, they become defensive. It's like, oh, you should just work harder, because that's like, you can't say that apparently, right? Because people get defensive. But I think the script is flipped when you go, hey, if I have to work harder, that means I'm in control of my own destiny. Now I've got control. So if I'm accountable for my own actions, I can actually change and do whatever I like. So if I want to buy more property, I actually can. It's not the system screwed me, or I can't do these things because of outside factors. That means that you've got limiting beliefs and you've also given the power to someone else. But if you personally believe that you can make more and you can spend less, well, then you win, because then it's unlimited. You're an unlimited resource of energy. Does that make sense?
It does, man. I like that. And using your looking for the proof first to then build on the belief system, really all you'd need to do in this case would be just earn an extra $1,000 a year. And then you've proved to yourself, well, I can earn more. I don't know if this was a thing or if I made this up when I was a kid. I called it the double club. And the whole idea was if you take $1 and you double it to $2 and then 2 to 4. And I think it's something like 27 times you got $1 million, right? I remember doing this years ago when I was a kid. And I think I got up to $170 or something. And I got distracted. There was something else shiny. But the concept of it is, though, if you can prove to yourself, well, if I can do this once and make the $1 into 2 and the 2 into 4 and the 4 into 8 and blah, 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 it's possible because whatever it is, 32 into 64 is just as possible as 64 into 128 and so on and so forth. By plugging that belief building system that you've got, that I'm now branding.
I like it.
That is only going to help in life, because if you can then earn that extra $1,000 a year, take control of that future instead of it being something that's triggering and something that sends down a negative path, it's only going to lead you somewhere better.
Yeah, correct. Now, whether it's wealth, but I think it goes beyond that to what you're saying. Relationships. Oh, I can't do this because my parents were like this. They brought me up like this. Everyone's got stories like that, but it's like what you make of it. And so if you now suddenly have the power to do it, you can create the dream life that you want to create. And again, I think everything else is excuses.
Tell me about one of your favorite deals. Now, this can be yours, this can be a client, anything you want. But a unicorn deal, something that you've got that you're just like, oh, if everyone was like this.
Yeah, one definitely sticks out because I put it on YouTube. It was in my early days of YouTube. And when I made it, the bad thing was that every time I spoke to someone who contacted me after watching that video was like, how do I get one of these? And I'm like, mate, line up, because I've been looking for these and I want 5 more of these.
Yep.
So let's go back to the start of 2020.
Okay.
The pandemic or the disease is not really a thing at the moment here in Australia. And I decide now I'm at a point where the nightclub stuff's going really well. I've already got my class 1 license. I'm going to become a BA, but I'm going to do that in 12 months time.
Okay.
Wedding stuff's going really well. I'm flying around the world doing destination weddings now as a DJ. So I'm getting paid well and I'm loving life. So I've gone, okay, now I want to purchase more property. And so at that time I was starting to look at Mount Gambier. And the reason for it, regional, it was in South Australia, the numbers worked. I was like, yeah, cool. From what I know, this makes sense. So I start talking to agents in the area, and there was one in particular I was talking to, and she had a few properties that I just kept missing out on. And because I was hustling away and just building this relationship, and now I've got to be thankful for the jobs that I've had, because Mars Chocolate, I was pretty much like an account manager. Okay. So you would always have to go back to the same stores, irrespective of if you could actually do anything. You were just going to show your face, and the store manager was going to go, oh, it's Ravi. Hey, what's up, Ravi? Okay, hey, what's up, Ravi? And the idea was that at some point, if he had any discretion around, promotional campaigns or positions in the store, the first person he's going to think of is me, because he's here every week. He'll come here, he'll fix it up, and then my numbers go up.
Makes sense.
So with that thought process, I was like, I'm just going to continue contacting this lady and this agent. I'm going to contact her, and at some point, I hope I'm going to get something that comes out of it. And what happened was I contacted her for about a few properties. Then there was no properties available, but I would still check in. And so I'm checking in with her constantly. And then she gives me a call and she goes, hey, there's something that's come across my desk. It's a family that basically go out there, they flip properties. So they renovate everything, they gut it out, renovate, and then they, flip it for a profit. And they've now landed themselves in an issue where they've got multiple projects where one of them requires their cash and they're going to make a lot more. So they're going to let go of this one a lot, cheaper than what it should be. I said, okay, so this is my first foray into off market deals, right? And I said, okay, how does it work? She goes, well, look, I think if this had a full campaign, it was probably going to sell in the 300s. So let's assume 300K. And I said, okay. And she goes, but I could probably get the property at 285. And I said, all right, but you're telling me they're desperate. She goes, yeah. I said, okay, well, how about 260? And she was like, no, they're not going to do 260. And I was like, well, okay, let's find out how desperate they are. Anyways, I think we landed on 260 or 265, right, from memory.
And what do you reckon it would have sold for?
It would have done 300.
Okay.
And is probably for the next part. So think about this. 3x3 duplex on like 800, 900 square meter land. And it was completely gutted out. So it was fully renovated. And I'm buying this for let's call it 265. And it was renting for 265 each side. So we're now at 530, right?
A 10% yield off the bat.
Yeah. And it's renovated. Okay. So I'm like, okay, so I'm not only getting this under market value because right place, right time, build the relationship. I'm now getting really good cash flow and I don't have to touch it because it's been renovated. This is a no-brainer. So that's probably the standout. And if I found 5 more like that, I'd be calling it a
deal.
Yeah.
I like to ask people this question. I like to try and find out what was the thing that actually led to it that can be replicated. Because finding this kind of a deal, like you said, I'm sure your phone rang a lot afterwards. It was like, can you find me more 10%?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But the standout is the prospecting. It's going back to the skill of nightclub promoting, talking to the managers, talking to the owners. It's going back to the skill in account managing when you're at Mars, but now you're applying it to property. And that's then got you a deal, which is, by the sounds of things, allowed you to buy $40,000, $50,000 worth of equity, just bang like that. And also given you what would have been a very positive cash flow deal.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I like it, man. And is this one, because you said this is at the start, so you weren't a BA yet, but did that kind of bite I could do this?
Correct. And that's where the self-belief kicks in again. Because I'm like, wait, I did this for myself. I didn't have any help.
And you're enjoying it too.
Exactly. I'm loving it. And I've gone, this is off market. So this was basically my first off market deal. And so when you go on realestate.com, it doesn't come up as a sold listing. And that's when it started all coming together, where I was like, okay, I can replicate this. And I know that there's people out there that are getting these good deals because no one's ever going to see my deal, which means there's others out there that I'm not seeing. And so the only way you can see this would be if you had extra help. But the only reason I could do it was because I used to work at night times. So during the day, I could call up agents. But I'm like, that's the opposite for most people. Everyone's working during the day. No one's picking up their phone at night. And so I could do this better than most people can because they have a job.
Makes sense. And from there, because for you, it's not just property. It's more of a holistic finance approach. What would you say are the biggest mistakes, so the opposite side of this coin, that you see people make, again, both in business, friends and family, doesn't matter where it comes from, but those things that really completely kill the portfolio growth that someone could have had?
I would go down to the fact that they don't really know why they're doing this. So yes, we all know that we want passive income. People want to retire early, this and that. But why? And I think when I've had these strategy sessions or discovery calls with people, I like to understand why. And when you ask enough questions, you get to the root of it. And it might be that, it's because I don't like my job. Okay, great. So maybe we should address that part first, because the property we can buy the assets, but this won't happen for the next 10 years. You can't leave, which means in my world, over the next 10 years, you can continue growing your portfolio, but let's go and test and find something you actually like.
Because otherwise you're still going to be unhappy for 10 years.
Exactly. And then when you get to the 10th year, you might have all this money, but you're still young, which means what are you going to do? You're going to sit at home. And then you're making all this money and you're going to go, I'm bored. I don't know what to do. And now you've got a bunch of other health issues that come off the back of that. So I thought, okay, well, if the reason you want to leave your job is because you really hate what you're doing right now, let's figure out what that looks like. And it maybe starts as a side hustle, continue working where you are for now, but now you know that there's a vision. And after hours, you're now getting all of your energy back because you get to do shit you like. Meanwhile, you continue growing your portfolio and And guess what? If it was set up as a company or set up as the right structure,
It's going to help you grow.
exactly, because that's exactly what I did. I didn't like the conveyancing part, but I sure as hell liked the nightclub stuff. And I was like, okay, I can use the conveyancing and the nightclub stuff, build my portfolio, I'll retire, plus I get to test a bunch of shit. And I'm sure I'm going to land on something I actually really like.
What's the most common one you see people do? Is there like drop shipping, Amazon, like because that's every second YouTube ad that I see.
Yep.
Is there something you see people commonly do that actually works well?
The fact that I have to think means there's probably not many that have come up.
Okay.
But I think it's like the boring stuff. I think when I've spoken to people and they go, oh yeah, I like this, but no, that they discount it straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, but no, that's not really a thing, right? Or hey, yeah, I do, a little bakery business, or I've got cupcakes that I sell, but that's not really a thing. I just do it on Instagram. Okay, so those things, how much do you make from that? Oh, but that's like a hobby. Okay, great. We're heading in the right direction because you're only doing the hobby, not for the money, but because you like it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start diving deeper, it's like, oh, I make like $200 a week from it. Oh, okay. Well, that's an extra 10K a year.
Mm.
So if you're only doing this as a hobby, imagine when you can make real bank, it's going to become like that proper flywheel because you get to love what you do. You'll work extra hours. You're your own boss potentially. And then you're making more. Plus you get to service more, which means now the real estate portfolio is probably going to supplement any of the shortfall of income that you're probably going to generate from your hobby, but you'll like it. So that's win-win.
Yeah, I've always thought I can't see this happening anytime soon, but if I ever threw in the towel on real estate, I reckon I'd buy a pressure washer.
Oh yeah, have you seen those TikToks?
I love them. I just clean people's driveways. There's just something therapeutic about
I'm not much of a tools guy, but I will watch all those videos too.
They're good, aren't they?
I think our algorithms are the same.
Yeah. Oh, mate, well, we're getting to the pointy end of things at the moment. And if I can actually just surmise what you just said there, the thing that I really hear then for the most common thing that really sets people, it's not so much sets them off course, but doesn't really keep them on the course of what they could necessarily achieve success-wise, is that lack of direction. They're not really knowing where they want to go and then committing to it. Have I got you right there?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What's an action step, Ravi, for anyone that's listening now that's like, I like this guy. They pull out the headphones and walk down a similar path.
They need to literally write down what's their North Star. So what is it that they're trying to get to?
Okay.
And that's a good starting point. They might write down, I want 150K, that's my number to retire, or I just want to live on a farm somewhere, or I want to live overseas. I want us to work part-time. I want to travel in a caravan, whatever it is. That's a good starting point. And you got to write it because it probably came up immediately. As you said that question, they immediately came into their head, that's what I want to do. Okay, great.
What's yours?
Mine's doing what I'm doing now.
Okay, so you're out there.
You're at it. I'm loving life.
Okay.
Yeah, this is it.
Yep.
This is the end game. And I do side quests, come to Adelaide and shoot podcasts with Todd. And then I'll go back to my day job.
Okay.
And so once they figure out that North Star, and if it's with your partner, sit down, maybe do individual ones and then do it with your partner. And then from there, start diving deeper into it. So if it's, hey, I want to make 150K and live overseas, let's start breaking down. Why do you need 150K? Okay, well, what sort of house am I going to live in? What's the dream house going to cost you? Okay, now we're reverse engineering it. So that's probably the greatest starting point is the end, and figure it out that way. I didn't do that. I just knew that I wanted to retire. Why? Not sure. How much? Not sure. All I knew was I wanted to retire. And it's okay because when you're young, like, how are you supposed to know? But I think if you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, you've probably got a better idea of the stuff you like and the stuff you don't like. So I think it's a lot easier to do when you're a bit older. Do you agree to that?
Absolutely. And I think that especially the stuff you like and the stuff you don't like, because I think when you're younger, you just think you like things because they're either like a status symbol of wealth or they're just popular. Like I always used to think I wanted like a Rolls Royce. I did actually watch a doco the other day on Rolls Royces, and I was fascinated how much effort went into making them. But that's side
It's
note.
reignited your passion for it.
Well, a little bit, but otherwise, but then the older I got, the more I was like, actually, I'm not a car dude, and like that's okay. It's just not my thing. But I do want a plane, and I'm going to buy a plane. But that's that's the thing that makes me happy. Over here isn't. And it's like they both require money. Surprisingly, you and I were talking about planes off air before, not as much as what you'd think. But it's about actually going towards that thing that does actually make you happy, that does actually like change your life in the way that you want it to. when I don't think I could have properly done that when I was 20 something.
Mm-hmm.
You still, and not saying a 20-year-old couldn't. If you're 20 and you're listening to this right now, don't think you can't, but you're right. Probably gets easier as you get a bit older.
I think one of the things that the fact that I run my business and I'm on socials and stuff, I spend less than 10 to 15 minutes a day on socials. So I don't sit on Instagram. I don't, scroll on things. I watch the high pressure, cleaning videos. There's a couple of minutes. But outside of that, I don't really care what anyone else is doing. So whether it's, competitors, whether it's people that I know, people I know of, like I don't look at anything as to what they do. And the reason I do that is because I'm living my best life on my terms, the way that I want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy. When I get onto socials and I start seeing other shiny objects and I'm like, oh, maybe that would be something I want. But the reality is, like, you mapped this out. You figured it out. And there's going to be natural things that come into your life the right and organic way, the way you want it to, when it needs to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Versus me on a Friday night, I'm bored in between ad breaks and I'm looking at something and I'm like, oh, now that's caused me to think negatively about a situation or think about things that aren't part of the plan. So the general direction that I'm heading in, I'm comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, I think a lot of people do it even in their 40s and 50s. But they sit there and they'll look at socials and they go, oh, that's a really nice car. I think I need a new car. But it's like, no, you don't. And similar to your story around, well, your happiness comes from maybe you're a plane dude and not a car dude, right? But now if you see someone who's driving a really nice car, you're like, oh, okay, well, I wonder, my car's shit. Maybe I should check out what that looks like. And so I think that people have this shiny object syndrome. I think there is probably a term for it, but they sort of get confused. I think they're all distractions and white noise.
Comparison can be the thief of joy.
Yep.
I don't know who originally said that, but I feel like it fits.
Yep. That's exactly it. So for me, it's just stay in your own lane. You're really happy there. And if you're not happy, you got to figure out why you internally aren't happy, and you'll be able to figure out the answers from yourself. I don't think the answers are going to be on someone else's Instagram story. That's what I think.
Quick tip on keeping positive, because I agree with you on that. I think that's a big thing. And this is probably more of an off-air thing. I don't think we've ever actually spoken about this on the show. I've talked to a few people that have come on, very successful people, that say a very similar story. Don't watch what other people are doing because all it does is distract me. And I'll look at what they're doing. It's like, oh, that seems to be working. Am I doing this? And you take your eyes off the prize of what you should be doing, walking down the path that you're walking down. Is there anything else that you do, apart from maybe restricting the socials to just pressure washing driveways, that helps you stay like positive and really in that mindset?
It comes down to like what my goals are and how those goals are not dictated by what someone else does. And if I'm to change my mind, it's based on what I want to do, right? So it's all coming back down to I'm in control of my own life the way I want it. So even if I do come across, an ad that pops up for a different buyer's agency or someone else doing stuff on YouTube or podcasts and things like that, it doesn't come from a negative space for me. I'm always like, oh, that's mad. Like, that's a cool idea. I'm glad that it works for you. I know what our plan is and I know what we're going to do and I know why we're doing it. So that's got nothing to do with 3 or 4 other people. Do you know what I mean? So for me, my focus when it comes to optimism is because it's derived from me. I know that when times are tough or they're volatile, why would I now go down deeper into that rabbit hole by going onto things like socials and saying, oh, the business isn't performing well this week. Let me go onto Instagram and then see a bunch of other people that are posting ads and doing numbers and on LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh, that's going to make me feel better. Said no one ever.
I couldn't agree more as far as especially around you're seeing someone else do really well. If you're maybe not feeling the best, it's one of the worst things that you can do. It's a Gary Vee saying, there's 2 ways to build the tallest building.
I know where you're going with this. I love this. Go for it.
Tear everyone else's building down or build the tallest building.
Yep.
And I feel like it's what I actually really like about the way that you're saying this, Ravi, is you just want to focus on building the tallest building, where there's so many people out there, a few in this space, that just want to tear everyone else's building down. But if you just focus on building your own building the way that you want it, as tall as you want it, life is just going to be better.
Yeah, because I can control that. I can control my building, but I'm going to go actively out of my way to go and destroy yours. But the thing is, if you have a really good structure on your building, you're probably going to figure out a way to overcome whatever I'm going to chuck at your building anyway.
Not only that, but then it's taken time away from you to build your building to what it could be, because now you're actively trying to destroy other buildings around you.
Yeah, I call it the high school mentality. And I feel like a lot of people, and 30s, 40, whatever, I think they're still living in high school. There's the popular kids Then there's the ones that are like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. Oh, did you study for the exam? No, you didn't study. Oh, but I did. Oh, I'm not going to. Like playing in the high school, like the playground.
Yep.
It's like, this is the real world. Your goals are different to mine. What does it matter what you want to do? I continue rent vesting. I don't have a fancy house. I'm going to get a house when I want to. I'm not on anyone else's timelines. You live your life, I live mine. And I'm sure there's going to be organic relationships that come about where you genuinely connect with people. And when I connect with those people and they run businesses, and some of those businesses are so much bigger than mine, but yet we sit there and we'll go, we have this thing. So once a month we catch up. There's about 4 of us, best mates, and we all run our own businesses, different industries.
This sounds cool.
Yeah. And so we called it Mastermind, but my partner really hates the name because it sounds like nerds.
How does that go again?
Yeah, I'll sound like a nerd. Oh, I'm going to Mastermind. Anyway, so we all hang out. We grab dinner. It's a good excuse for us to catch up as well. And our focus is that we will go and deep dive into any issues each business has. And we try and go get 4 people that are from different industries, have very different personalities and very different set of skills. And we'll go and attack that one problem. And then that person is going to go walk away and say, hey, that's fantastic. We've now created our own networking little hub, and everyone just keeps upskilling, upgrading. And because they're from different industries, they look at it differently. So they're not just going, oh, you're in the BA space. Well, I'm a BA as well. Or, hey, I've seen other BAs do this because I'm a mortgage broker. No, it's completely different.
How different are we talking? What's like one of the other industries that's in the group?
Travel. He runs a travel agency.
So it's not like he's a real estate broker. Or like
no.
It's completely different. Okay.
So what happens is you get a fresh perspective on what you're doing. So he's like, hey, well, we did this with this. You could actually do the same. And it's like that blue ocean strategy. I don't know, there's a book out there around how you can either stay in like, a Red Sea, which is basically everyone just killing each other for something small, or you have this idea of the blue ocean, which is you create something completely new. And because you've created something completely new, like a new offering, then you've got a whole ocean to work with because it's in its own league.
That's cool.
Right? So instead of everyone playing in this playground where everyone's like, oh, you did this, I did that. Okay, let me just copy what you're doing. Instead of that, just focus on your own thing and you're going to find something that comes naturally to you. So that's why I started YouTube. On YouTube at the time, there was not many people out there. I was like, oh, let's give it a go. I think it'll work. And then I kept doing it. I kept persistent with it. I was consistent with it and it worked out. And now there's a bunch more people on YouTube, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm like, hey, I'm actually really proud of myself because I feel like I started a movement on the fact that now people make long form content, which is amazing. And so if it works for their business, fantastic. But I think a lot of people sort of sit in there and they point fingers at each other. And I think that's probably why I'm probably more optimistic than most because I don't like to tear people's buildings down. I focus on my building and my building alone. And when I'm not thinking about my business, I go and hang out with the 5 people that are really cool and they hang out with me. I watch the footy and live a pretty simple life. That's it.
Ravi, everything started from very humble beginnings for you, mate. As a kid living in a, what was it, two bedroom house with
it was 3 bedroom.
3 bedroom, several families. You're working hard at school. You didn't have to go to work a job because mum and dad are like, you commit yourself. You can just keep going working at school. You then tried several different careers. By the sounds of things, did pretty well at all of them. Started investing pretty early. Have built a substantial portfolio, now like 13 million plus. You're now running a huge buyer's agency. Mate, you've got a very interesting story. Do you remember that show with Mike Wallace, This Is Your Life? I feel like I need to present people with a book at the end.
That's gold.
But arguably, we've arrived at the most important question of all. Ravi Sharma, what is your favorite pizza?
Wow, that's a serious question. To be honest, I'm real simple. So I like margarita pizza.
Okay.
Right? And some context for you, because the people closest to me know this really well, and I feel like I want to invite you into my inner circle, right? Because you're a cool dude, is I'm very basic with food. And I don't think my taste buds have changed much since I was 12. Okay. That's why I still like KFC. And people think like, oh, he's just putting it on. I don't like fancy restaurants. I don't like stuff that when I look at it or I read the menu and I don't know what it is, I don't like that. I just want some chicken. I want some rice. Maybe I want some chips.
Yeah,
I'm good. And I'll have the same thing. Now my girlfriend's introduced me to things like salmon and, we'll have prawns and crab and this and that.
Is there any broccoli making its way in there?
Yeah, I don't like broccoli though. No. Yeah, so my thing is, and it's weird because people around me have they've accepted this.
Yeah.
But whenever I've got like, say a new hire comes into the business, they're like, oh, you know, what's for lunch? Ravi's going to have the same shit, right? And so they're like, oh, do you want to try this? And I'm like, no, I don't want that. And they go, okay, but have you tried it before? I was like, no. Like, but then how do you know if it's good or not? I'm like, I'm very content with what I've got right now. I don't need to try that. My level of happiness is where I need it to be. I don't think trying that extra piece of food, inviting that into my ecosystem is going to dramatically change my life. That's just how my brain works. So yeah, margarita pizza.
Margarita pizza. And so this is basically coming from the point of view of I've enjoyed it since I was a kid. I don't need, like, if someone's like, hey, try this like barbecue meat lovers with prawns, surf and turf, whatever. You're just like, I like the margarita.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are you getting it? You Domino's, classic, value, or are you like getting it somewhere fancy?
No, I've started liking the Italian wood fire pizza. I've upskilled on that front. Like, you know, lifestyle creep.
Their girlfriend making it change?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
okay.
She's tried her best. You know, obviously with COVID, we moved in together and, you know, we tried a bunch of different foods and things like that. When I say we tried, I'm just saying it's the same shit, but just at a different joint. She'd be like, oh, let's go try out this new place. And I'm like, cool, there's like El Jana's. And she'd be like, okay, that's charcoal chicken. Yeah, cool. What are we going to do next week? Like, what about Frengo's?
That's another chicken place, I'm assuming.
That's
okay.
it, yeah.
All right, Bianca and I actually learned that about ourselves and combined. After we finished this reno in Brisbane one day, we were like in a hotel, like sort of pampering ourselves to be like, yeah, like well done. And then we went down for this digger station. It was like $300 a head or something. And we actually walked out. Bianca, for some, I can't remember what happened. She was actually feeling sick. But we had the first, I think, 3 courses, and it was just like, this isn't us. And we ended up actually getting pizza and eating it in bed. But there was just this stark contrast between like the level of enjoyment of just having like pizza in bed together in a hotel watching something and like spending $600 on a meal or whatever it cost. And it was like, it was nice, don't be wrong, but it was like, I just like what I like.
Yeah, 100%. It's so wholesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I proposed to my girlfriend, we did it in Dubai.
Yeah.
And it was pizza and pasta. It was on a beach somewhere, and I had planned this thing. I was like, look, I know this part she'll love, but I know she'll also love the rooftop bar afterwards where there's like, you know, fancy shit on the menu. I know that she likes that sort of stuff here and there. But at the core, she's like 90% the way that I operate. She just didn't know it. Now she's adapted, right? And so I booked in like the rooftop bar for us to go afterwards. And so we're eating, you know, I proposed, okay, everyone's happy. And then she's like, oh, so what happens next? And I was like, oh, we'll go to this rooftop bar. And then it's like, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, maybe we should just get dessert and just go back to like the hotel and watch a movie. And I was like, now I know. That's why she's the one.
Yeah, bath cake.
What's a bath cake?
We eat cake in the bath.
Interesting.
It's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like this is going to go in a totally different direction. Ravi Sharma, mate, I think I should probably start wrapping things up there. But mate, this has been a hell of a chat. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sure it won't be the last time you're on, man.
No, I appreciate having me on, mate. Thank you.